Bob, thank you so much for joining us today on the What is a Good Life podcast. Since being made aware of your work and watching several of your videos and being somewhat entranced by your eyes, I'm really intrigued to see where this conversation goes today.
Me too.
So we jump straight in, Bob, with the question of, is there a question you're exploring as you move through life?
Yeah, it's been with me my whole life. It's really guided my life. Um, I got started early. The Jesuits got a hold of me. I was Jesuit educated, high school and college. Took it really seriously, and the question uh, emerged in those years. What do I really want to do with my life? But it was asked from the perspective of call. What am I called to do? And I didn't really have an answer for many years. And at one point, I was working in the family business. It's an agribusiness. This is after college. A couple of years in, I'm managing production in a feed manufacturing plant. So I'm making hog food and dog food. And one night late in the middle of the night, I was frustrated. I knew this wasn't it. I didn't know what it was. I had studied economics and finance and statistics and stuff in college in the business school, but I'd also grown with a real passion for the development of people. And I'm in this feed plant and I'm more and more disturbed, and I'm unloading a railroad car in the middle of the night, and because the plant was down, and I'm inside and it's 2 in the morning, and I get inside this railroad car and I'm sweeping out the last bit of feed ingredients into the pit where it goes. And I get done, I just prop myself up inside, put my feet in that hopper bottom, and just rest. I was exhausted. And out of my mouth, completely unrehearsed, out loud came, I'm not becoming who I am.
Hmm.
And it was declarative. And I was unrehearsed. I just wasn't reflecting on anything. It just came out. And I knew I'd crossed some threshold. I knew I couldn't go back. I'd spoken the truth I couldn't go back on. So I synchronicity went to work, and about 2 weeks later, somebody, and I don't remember who, gave me Rilke's book, Letters to a Young Poet. And in that book, a young poet writes to Rilke, sending samples of his work, and says, "Hey, Rilke, do I have what it takes to be a poet? Should I be a poet?" And the the letter that Rilke wrote back stunned me. He said, "You're looking outward. You've asked me to advise you. You've sent your stuff to editors and so on. You're looking outward, and you've asked me to advise you, and I beg you to give up all that. Go inward. Search for an answer deep inside." I'm paraphrasing. He said, "Ask yourself in the stillest hour of the night, must I write? Find out if it's spreading out its roots in the deepest places of your heart. And if you should answer this question within the affirmative, then build your life according to that necessity. Your life," this is an amazing line, "your life, even into its most indifferent and slightest hour, must be a sign of this urge and a testimony to it." And what hit me when I read it was, one, it was the right question, and two, I knew the answer to it. I knew that I knew. I knew that if I sifted the database of my life, the times when I was most alive, the times when I was least alive, I could see the pattern, what had been working me. And so I did. I went home that night after work and started a journal which I called my must journal, musts. What must I be about? And the question that I was working was, what must I be about in this life in order to live the life I came here to live and not someone else's life? There's a lot of pressure to live someone else's life when you're working in a family business. And and I wrote down 14 musts. Just they came right out, bulleted them out. And then I spent 30 pages writing about each one, total 30, 40 pages. How do I know that's important to me? Where did I learn that? And there were things on that list that I didn't know how they would ever go together. And there were a lot of things on that list. I'm like, how do you build a life on this? Like, I want to help people grow and develop personally, professionally, emotionally, spiritually. Really? I'm making dog food. How do I get from here to there? I want to be challenged technically. I grew up, my dad was an engineer. I grew up building stuff and reading blueprints, drawing blueprints. I loved all that technical stuff. And I was really challenged in this plant technically because it was new and it was, I'll break it down all the time. So I was the liaison between the plant and the engineering team, and I loved it. And so I wanted to be challenged. Well, how do you get technical challenge and people together in the same? I wanted my life to be a unity of purpose. I must be a unity of purpose. I don't want to live my passion extracurricularly. So these were musts that emerged. Intimacy was a must. So I I I sent it aside. I went about my life. I made choices, but it guided my life. And I was up in the attic, I don't know, 15, 20 years later, and I found this journal. And I pulled it out and I started reading and I wept. I just broke down and wept because it's it all had come true. It was in ways that I had no idea. Like I didn't know about this profession. The company I was working for, the family business, had a training and organization department, but I didn't know about it. And so it was only later that I got to know about it. And and I said, well, maybe I'll start there. And it's all happened in ways I couldn't imagine, including the technical. I mean, you don't get more technical than the high-tech business we're in. It's a software business. It's a stats, and all of that was extremely challenging technically, and I loved it. So it's a play on a Joseph Campbell Folly or Bliss, which I made more complicated when I first came across it, but it's really simple. If it brings you joy, do more of it. So what really was guiding the must was, when was I most alive? Okay, I want to do more of that. And then it's like, wow, it's just unfolded and unfolded and unfolded. And it's been guided the whole time intuitively. I started playing with intuition. I learned about it from not humans, Innovation Associates. I took a course called Leadership and Mastery, which was their flagship course. This was Peter Senge's organization, Charlie Kiefer, Robert Fritz. They were leading the field at the time. They were the thought leader in the field. And this workshop was amazing. And part of it was, one of the disciplines or practices is intuition, balancing intuition and reason. So there were intuition exercises, which I still use. in my training. And it oriented me to the ability to tap into a larger field of intelligence for lots of things. But in response to this question, what's wanted of me now? What's next? What's happening? Well, one day I was deep in meditation, and I got a very clear, like, you're supposed to start this 4-year healing training school. Uh, Not that I would start it, but I would join it. And I'm like, I'm got 3 kids. I got an emerging business, and I argued with the voice in my head. I said, I can't do that. I don't have time for that. I got all this financial responsibility, and the business will be fine. Uh, and then, and I kid you not, I wrote this down word for word. Look for a correspondence with Tom Brown on the heels of your trip to Denver. Like, what? I wrote it down afterwards. And then after that, just after that, a big white light kind of came at me visually in my mind. I'm like, what the heck was that? Anyway, I'd learned to trust these intuitions. I'd done enough practice with them that I'd learned to trust them. So I had we didn't have the internet then, so I had a whole stack of binders or brochures, and I sent away to these schools. And one was Tom Brown's school. If you're familiar with Tom Brown's work, he's amazing. Was trained by an Apache shaman. And so I sent away, I thought he was in Denver, the Denver area, but I was wrong. So all this stuff started coming back. Nope, nothing on the heels of my trip to Denver. Nothing. Tom Brown School, not there. Huh. Barbara Brennan information comes back. On the weekend that I was going to be traveling back from Denver, in Chicago was a 3-day training by Barbara Brennan. And I was flying through Chicago. My flight went through O'Hare. And it would have been Friday night coming back from a 3-day workshop with AT&T. And I'm like, okay, I'll go to that. I went. My wife joined me. And on day 3, I'm waiting outside the ballroom for the doors to open and just standing there talking to people. And I look over here, and sitting on the floor is a guy reading a Tom Brown book. And I go over to the guy, sit down next to him. Can we talk? Turns out he's faculty with the Tom Brown School. Worked with Tom for many, many years, knew it well. We had a great conversation about it. We walk into the ballroom. We start this meditation, and here comes that white light again. And I went, like, that's when it hit me. I didn't put it all together until that moment. I went, Tom Brown heals a trip to Denver, 4-year healing school, white light. Okay, I'm supposed to go to the Brennan School. And I did. And 4 years of intense, energetic healing, learning, and opening higher sense perceptions and working with energy and light and stuff, which was all foreign to me. Um, I was open to it because of some of the things I'd seen in trainings we'd done that went very deep. People would have very, very significant physical shifts. You'd see it in their body, the colors of their face, and so on. We had one workshop where a person came in on day 3, sat down, and I'm like, who has the audacity to show up on day 3, not having been to days 1 and 2? She sat down at a table, and the people at her table, and they didn't recognize her, and she'd been there the whole week, and
Wow.
all 3 days. They're like, Julie, is that you? They were shocked by the change in her whole presence and countenance. And then when she shared what she had learned, it was quite remarkable. And that I had no place in my paradigm for how that could possibly be the case. And what we do with that is we dismiss it. but I couldn't because it happened multiple times. And so then came the invitation to learn more about that at the Brennan School, which was unbelievable learning. And that's where the model of that sits underneath the leadership circle got knitted together. I'd been working on it, for many years, but that took the work a lot deeper and broader. And it was in that uh, that I came across stages of adult development in Bob Keegan's work. We were supposed to write a thesis. See, this is synchronicity and intuition and everything working. When you're, like Campbell said, when you're on a path, the doors open, all the doors open. And so this this was just a continuation of the musts. And Barbara required a thesis, and she said the reason for the thesis is that it sets the energetic matrix for your future.
Hmm.
And I'm still new at this, and I got a really strong statistical research-oriented left brain, and I just go bullshit. Yeah, right. Okay, I'm gonna write a thesis. Well, I there was a question that emerged, and I won't get into the whole story around it, but I began to be in an ethical crisis around the work that I'd done with my whole career wasn't the kind of work that was being described as in the great traditions, which we started to touch into as we worked into higher dimensions of the field. Like, how do you develop a self when there isn't one? Or Almas's work, any move, even purposeful move from what is an egoic move. And I couldn't square that with even follow your bliss, purpose, vision, choice, work your beliefs and assumptions and so on, and get clear about what you want and create it. And I couldn't dismiss that that had been really powerful for me and really powerful for others. So I was in this conundrum. And I didn't want to teach or stuff that wasn't true.
Hmm.
So I thought, well, maybe what was good work at one point along the way is not good work further on down the road, or not the same work. And so I remembered from Psych 101, Kohlberg, stages of moral and ego development. And I thought, I wonder if any of that might speak to this. So that became my research project. And again, before the internet, I'm in a bookstore looking for Kohlberg in the K section of psychology. And there, sticking halfway off the shelf, is a book called Our Evolving Self by Bob Keegan. And I had never heard of Bob Keegan. I pull it off, I look at it, I can see some diagrams in it. Looks like what I'm looking for. Bought the book. Completely took the model that I'd been working on and integrated it. So from, two orientations that Robert Fritz did a really great job of, like reactive and creative, but that's all over the field. Self one, self two in the inner game of golf. Play to win, play not to lose from Larry Wilson. This framework, external locus of control, internal locus of control, all of that stuff was uh, what Kagan was showing me was that it was stage specific, that there's a trajectory that adults go through, like children, very sequential in terms of how they grow, if they grow and develop from one inner operating system or inner game to the next. And I was just mesmerized. I read everything I could on that, became my thesis. And I wrote a paper on it for the thesis, which now sits on our website. And it was the foundational paper that led to the leadership circle profile. The whole profile and the model that sits underneath it integrated in that thesis. And then I had the dimensional structure to build out that became the profile, but the model solidified, including the deep shadow work and that we'd done in the Brennan School and so on. So, and all that's written up in our book, Mastering Leadership and Scaling Leadership, So this is just how it's been synchronistically led, intuitively led the whole way, including coming out of the Brennan school. I was broke. I'd used up all our money because you don't make money. It was so deep into that process that I couldn't really stay with the business, give it the attention it needed. And so I was basically broke. And I walked out on the beach one morning and broke down in tears. We were on a family vacation. It was sunrise. I broke down in tears because I knew the projects I was working on were going to fail. I'd put a lot of time and money in them. And I knew I was broke and I had no income. I had 3 kids, mortgage, da 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 da. And all I had was this assessment that was sitting on the back burner. And after a good cry, I said, okay, I'll move it to the front burner and I'll have it in the market by the end of the year. This was in March. I'll have it by first of the year, which I did. And the software wasn't fully written, but the assessment was built and we were the first to put, which came intuitively. I was sitting one morning in meditation and we have to do this online. And nobody was doing this online. And no, that's where it's going. This has to go online. I had no idea how to do that. I found a programmer, found a guy, and did it. He did it out of his garage. Wrote the software on this, in the evenings. He had a full-time job coding. And on January 2, the first business day of the year, I got a call. We need a good 360 assessment. Do you know of one? Do you have one? And I said, uh-huh. I can't explain that. I said, I'll have this in the market first of the year. And on the first business day of the year, I got a call. The software wasn't fully written yet. I said yes. And then we had to get it written to get the results out of the computer. And sure enough, we did. And we did. Literally, I got the results as I was walking out the door. And so my whole life has had this kind of magic about it from the very question you asked. Like, what's the question that's been working you? And all I've done as I look back is keep saying yes and not knowing where it's taking me, how it's going to work out, if it's going to work out. Uh, if you, it's like there's a combination of my passion, what I'm passionate about, what I'm curious about, what I'm interested in, and some little voice in my head that says, do this. And so I keep saying, okay. And it's led me here. And when had finished writing Scaling Leadership, that was in 19, just before COVID hit. I kind of lifted my head up from all the writing and the book promotion and said, okay, what's next? But I was 65. And at 65, you don't assume you have long life. And I know from creating businesses that it takes a long time to bring something through. It's not a quick game. And so I got asked to speak in Africa at a couple different locations. So we went on a little speaking tour of Africa. Kim came with me. And the question that I decided to pose for myself was a thought experiment. I framed it that way. I'm going to do a thought experiment. And the experiment was assume I only have 5 good years to live, 5 healthy years, and then my health fails and it's close up shop. Who do I want to become and what is wanted of me now? The question had shifted. What do I want? This is the fundamental shift from a self-authoring in Keegan's language, where I'm authoring my sense of vision and purpose. And that's an important capacity to bring online. But once it's mature, in the next stage, you begin to realize that it's been you're not stalking the longing, it's stalking you. And it's been and it wants something of you. There's a larger reality that wants to use me, move through me. And it has its own purposes. And so the question was, what is wanted of me now? And who do I want to or need to become to bring that through? And I found another must after all these years. I hadn't added anything to that list. And it surprised me. And it came again with, when was I most alive? And I realized I had been most alive in communities of transformation, like the Brennan School, like some work I did in Appalachia in my college years and some other experiences. Like, that's when I am most alive. And so I said, okay, I must convene communities of transformation. 5 years later, we launched the Unity Academy, which is now my sole focus, pretty much. A year-long community of transformation, deep development, post-creative. What's the next stage of leadership look like? What we call integral. But I knew, if you look at all the sort of psychological literature, it wasn't complete, because the late stages beyond that are unitive. And I'm more and more convinced that society and our relationship with the earth, with each other, with finance, with economics, with everything, is just not working. And not working for most of us. It's working for some, but for most of life on the planet, it's not working. And um, underneath that is a fundamental misapprehension of how reality is organized and how it works. We have a mistaken understanding, a limited understanding of reality is a unity. It's not made up of separate parts. But our paradigm is fundamentally separate and fundamentally material and fundamentally dead. That's not the emerging picture coming out of quantum science. Nothing is separate. Everything is entangled. Everything is updated. Everything is interdependent. The spiritual traditions strip away the spiritual language. I'm in a big study now using chat on, if we look across all these traditions, what are the meta patterns? They're all very different. You can get lost in the forest and not see the forest for the trees. But if we step back and look at the patterns across all these traditions, and it's astonishing. And what I've come to realize is that these great beings that have been trying to tell us for millennia, here's how reality works. Now, religions have grown up, and you get all kinds of, especially at the conventional understanding of those religions, you get all kinds of weirdness. But if you really get close to what the profundity of what these men and women were realizing, and to strip away the religious language, you realize they're describing an ontology. They're describing how reality works and how you get more direct access to it, to be more vital, to be more alive, to be more whole, to be more joyful, to be more loving, to manifest more effortlessly to create what wants to come through, to be of service to others, to be able to heal, to intuit. All of this they describe in great detail. Um, and it all does follow a meta pattern, which Ken Wilber, you know, described as nested holons. There is an ontology. It's a frequency field of, a whole, I don't know, billion octaves. How much of that do you have access to? Most of us, pretty limited. And so I'm really interested in how do we move into the next stage of leadership, but intuitively informed. Um, and and learn the more subtle mastery of working in and as energy, because it's all energy. There's no material. There are no particles. It's there's particle-like behavior that energy exhibits. So it's all a field, a unified field. And there are ways, since our paradigm doesn't really get that yet, we don't think to look there. We don't actually trust that intuition could be real because in a mechanical, separate material universe, it can't be real. But if our fundamentals are wrong on that, which quantum science is starting to point out, but even quantum science, even though Einstein and Max Planck, initiated that over 100 years ago, it still hasn't found its way into our understanding. And it lines up like this with the great traditions. Just different lenses through which they're seeing reality and how it works. So I'm fascinated now by that integration to take the model that emerged at the leadership circle and explicate its deeper underpinnings, and then build communities of transformation. Like, how do we really step into the next level of leadership and co-author a new earth, co-author that's fundamentally premised on our inherent unity uh, rather than our diversity. I mean, just look at what's going on in the Middle East as we speak, war that's spreading
Mhm.
all over. Um, it's mad, just like nothing could describe the failure of this way of thinking more than what's happening there. And it's fundamentally built on uh, a wrong foundation, a wrong premise.
Well, there's so many points along what you've shared there that I was fascinated in, and so now I'm spoiled for choice in this moment, Bob. But I'm just really, really curious from your point of view, just that sense of co-authoring a new world, and even just as you say, the recent events and well, not even just the recent events, but particularly even what we're seeing right now in the Middle East. What gave you in that moment of asking that question again, what is a must around the age of 65 or a must emerging again? And then this idea that we're fundamentally misunderstanding something about this life. Could you give me a sense of how that struck you or how that gave or how clarity emerged around that?
Well, I've had a meditative practice since college. Um, it's taken twists and turns. Um, in the Brennan years, when I started to learn about energy and how you could circulate energy in the body, I began experimenting with that in my meditation practice. And I didn't have a lot of knowledge of other traditions that I'm really only learning in a deeper way now. Um, but I stumbled onto something, and it started to open into early what would be called mystical experiences. And the boundaries between self and others started to blur. And it became more and more joyful, ecstatic, loving. And then, of course, I want more of that. Who wouldn't? It's joyful, it's loving, it's blissful. It's like, wow, that's pleasurable. That feels good. I want more of that. And it just kept opening and opening. And one time on retreat, this was 7 years ago, maybe, I don't know. I started getting downloads on physics. I don't know. Well, I don't have any background there. I'm just writing down physics and then geometry. And I don't have any, I've never played with geometry and sacred geometry, then I go start learning about it, and the downloads keep coming. And so it was teaching me again. And I have I have to be careful with physics because it's very, very complex, and you can easily turn it into pseudoscience. I hooked up with a physicist to kind of keep me honest about that. Um, and so the other thing in there is I got into relationship with a great realizer, Adida Samraj, and Adida wrote a book called Not To His Peace, which I've endorsed, and another book that was a short compilation of some of his writing called Prior Unity. And I wrote the back cover of that because both Not To His Peace was one of his last book. He finished it just before he died. And he calls for a new world order. He calls for, and that is fundamentally premised, the presumption of prior unity, of our inherent unity, rather than the presumption of our separateness. Separate self, separate world, separate God, separate everything. It's you can't build the future that now must emerge from on separateness. That we see where it's gotten us, and so it's been a kind of guiding principle for me. It's the only way forward.
You used an expression earlier when you were talking about receiving this kind of declarative expression of not becoming who I am. And then you used an expression saying unity of purpose. Just curious, was that the way you were describing it at that point? And has that word unity held something throughout your life?
Well, I wasn't at that point. I wasn't thinking along more unitive understand. That's a much later stage development, but that's the language that came through. I want my life to be a unity of purpose. But it was more focused on, I know there's some things I'm about, and I don't want to do them after work on the weekends. I want my work and my sense of purpose and joy and fulfillment to be combined.
Right.
And I don't want to live two lives. Over here, I just earn a living, and over here, I do what really matters. No, I want that to come together. I didn't know how, but I knew that needed to be the case for me. So that's what the unity of purpose meant.
Just really amazed at your capacity to adapt to moments that up until that point you had no experience of, like a white light hitting your head,
Yeah, yeah.
a download of physics. Curious as to how you kind of adapt to that, particularly when it's challenging somewhat of maybe already some of your, like, let's say, left brain interpretation of the world.
Well, yeah, I have a really strong left brain that dismisses it quite readily. And it's constant voice in my head, constantly jabbering away, like you're just making this up. It's not really happening. So, but when I was traveling after learning about intuition, I was com pretty much complete. My wife and I were newly married. We didn't have children. I was pretty much complete at the workplace that I was working. And she and I wanted to travel. So we said, boy, we better do it now before we have kids. So we went around the world together. We both quit our jobs um, and put on backpacks and took off. 3.5 months, we went all the way around the world. It was an amazing trip. And at the time I was looking before I left, I started looking for the next job. I was done some interviews and stuff, and people were interested. And they said, okay, well, talk to us when you get back. So I was looking for another job. Well, I decided to do a thought experiment. I didn't have that language then, but I decided to do a thought experiment on this trip. I would experiment with intuition every day because I was new to it, and I was going to do one of these exercises, which we now call the teacher exercise, and I was going to write down whatever I got and not judge it till I got home. And then looking over that whole volume of whatever I wrote, I'd decide, is this just BS or is there something here? And so I did. I did it every day on trains and planes and, early morning. Every day and the way we were traveling was pretty close to there, so I had lots of that kind of time. And it blew me away early in the trip. I'm like, this is uncanny what I'm picking up. And then I'd write stuff down that I didn't understand. And then a book would come in. Somebody would give me a book along the way. I'd be reading the book and I'd be like, this is exactly what I wrote down. And I want to be clear here. I don't think I have any special capacity here. I I tell these stories because I think these are universal capabilities that we've ignored in our Western paradigm. And but they're there for the taking. Anyway, on that trip, quite by surprise, I decided to start my own business. And I came home and instead of looking and interviewing for a job, I was like, okay, I'm going to set up shop. This was in 86. And so I actually did enough experimenting. And then, of course, all the experience at the Barbara Brennan School was uncanny. Both what I learned to have access to, what I saw these teachers be able to do, blew me away. It was like, that's undeniable. What, what can't dismiss that. So I slowly, with practice and some evidence and experience, learned to hold the left brain at bay, respect it, also a valuable bullshit detector there, but trust my experience, learn to trust my experience. And it's still a challenge to trust that experience, especially as it moves into further on into new new levels of the field, new experiences open up, and they're like, no way.
Can you give me an example of something that has almost tested your capacity to trust your experience?
Well, large and small. Start with small and how it works for me. I get a call from my cousin's husband, who's a commander in the Iraq War. I didn't get a call, I got an email. Two of his, two men under his command were badly. One flown to Germany, one flown to Houston. The one in Houston was burned over much of his body. He asked prayers. So I did. The next morning in meditation, I prayed in particular for this man in Houston. And I was in a expanded state of awareness, and it's hard to put into words because there wasn't really a me there, but but my presence was with him, and it was all light. And I I just held him in love and light, and I felt him let go. And it was as if he just dissolved into me, into light, into the light. And I got done with that meditation. I'm like, wow. Whew. And I went out, and my left brain goes, made it all up. But I went out and I said to my wife, I think he died in my arms this morning. And of course, back to work. Yeah, right. I made it all up. Email next day. He died at that time. I got an email saying he died the day before at that time. No, I can still write that off, coincidence. But you start stacking experience like that up and you go, wait a minute. The current uh, challenge is to embrace a deeper identity. Hafiz has a poem. I don't know the whole poem, but part of it goes, you think you know who you are? You don't have a clue. You are the divine elephant with amnesia, trying to live in an anthole. You are the divine elephant. The Sufi mystics play with imagery, and there's a lot of humor in it and playfulness. And you are the divine elephant with amnesia, trying to live in an anthole. Well, this is actually incredibly precise. And in some traditions, the elephant is a symbol, or maybe even more than a symbol of the divine. And so he's working with that, saying, no, you are that. You are the divine. Trying to live in a home on an ant-hole, it's way too small. This narrow, separate identity that you hold so dear, it's not who you are. Fundamentally, you are the whole thing. There's only the one manifesting in many, many, many forms. And in the great traditions, thou art that. Well, that's hard to take in. To really begin to realize what they're saying about the nature of reality and the deep essence of being at your core. It's very hard to embrace because my mind just says, no way, not me, not possible. And it's not exclusive. It's not an exclusive claim. It's who and what we all are. Just look different, that's all. And that's the fundamental unity. And it's been sitting right in front of us. I mean, I grew up in the Christian tradition. Jesus said, and said, you know, the people asked, well, when did we feed you? When did we visit you in prison? He says, when you did that for anyone, even for the least among you, you did it to me. Like I am that person. I am therefore you. You just don't realize it yet. It's right there. And it's across all the traditions.
There's something that often only occurs to me when there's some kind of reference to the divine where I can simultaneously almost laugh and cry at the same time. And as you were saying about the elephant in the ant-hole, I was experiencing both laughter and a moisture in my eyes. I'm really intrigued. And just when you mentioned the initial thing being this is a small one of a soldier potentially dying in your arms. I guess the big one could only go one way. But I'm just really intrigued. How do you even sit with that, with the sense of like kind of earnestness, which I feel off you in terms of how you're going through different experiences, still the discernment. But yet, I just curious as to how do you even, what occurs for you when you even sit with that?
There's like, Marianne Williamson maybe said it. Maybe it was from the Book of Miracles, Course in Miracles. I don't know. But we're really more afraid of our bigness than our smallness. Who am I to be that? If I really step into it. So I'm, and yet, especially now, see, this Unity Academy is teaching me more than it's teaching the people going through it. I have to embody it in order for it to even begin to land in the room with people. And so it's a time right now. I'm like the edge for me right now is like allowing myself to admit that I actually have these capabilities or powers or that, and then to step into them even more fully, continue to cultivate them even more fully because they serve. And that, for me, challenges me to actually grow into who I am. It's like I'm not becoming who I am. I'm still growing into who I am and who we all are. And but it tests the edges of what I'm willing to embrace about myself. And yet I'm now getting feedback that there's a transmission that's happening. And I'm like, really? Really? And I could push that away and say, no, no, no. But that doesn't actually serve. This serves without aggrandizement, without like calling attention. Just no, I'm going to show up as fully and radiantly and wholeheartedly as possible and keep growing into that because that's what heals. That's what makes whole. And it isn't me, Bob Anderson. It's what's being conducted through this vehicle. So how do I become more and more transparent to that? There was a, I'm a, I'm a stereophile. I love music and I love great sound. And I have good systems in every room of the house and one that's really good. Now it's old stuff, but it's really good. And I put people down in front of it to listen to a piece of music and they can't believe what they're hearing. They just sit there like, they turn around and go, you've ruined music for me. I'll never hear music the same. I mean, like, I didn't realize. And that's what the great ones do. And I got onto it as a metaphor early. I had bought a sound system, a new one, like one from college. Speakers rotted out. So I went out at a Best Buy or some bargain shop and bought a sound system. And it was like, eh. So somehow I ended up by accident in a high-end sound shop. And I'm talking to Carl. And Carl's 350 pounds. He can barely stand up behind the counter. And I'm explaining my new sound system. And I can tell he's unimpressed. And I go, Carl, you don't sound very impressed. He goes, I'm not. I said, why not? He said, well, I said, do you have a better system here? Yeah. Would I hear the difference? Yeah. I said, show me your best system. And he leans across the counter and he looks me right in the eye and he says, are you sure you want to do that to yourself? And I said, yeah. And I went in and I heard music. I couldn't believe I just was like, I was bit. And then years later, I'm in there again and I'm trading in this old preamp with lots of bells and whistles and gadgets and it's heavy and it's like trading that in for a new one that I bought from him. And I get the new one and I unbox it right there in front of him because I'm excited to see this thing. And I pull it out and it weighs nothing. It's light as a feather. There's one knob on it. And I go, Carl, I paid $3,000 for this. There's nothing here. And he looks at me and a gleam in his eye and he says, yeah, nothing between you and the music. And I went, oh, I get it. Uh, and in some ways, that's the passion is how do I get the original music in the room? And when it is presenced in the room, uh, and you put somebody who's never been in that kind of a presence, they go, and that's what is possible here with development, that we become that kind of a catalytic, transformative transmission or presence.
I just want to ask you, how do you encounter moments then? And I understand this was at different stages, a different stage in your life, but even how did you navigate moments, for example, when you're on the beach and you're in tears, wondering how you're focusing. Can you just give me a sense of how all of that is still part of this life and this synchronicity and everything else?
Well, I could do a whole equally long conversation on all my doubts and fears that have been in my face the whole time. I wasn't blessed with confidence. Like I've had a lot of fear, uh, and doubt, and even deeper. Um, I'll say more about that in a minute. But our I learned, David White has a line in a poem, "The spark behind fear, the spark behind fear recognized as life." That life, that flame, is shrouded by fear, and you have to move through it, to go through it, to give it kindling and feed it, and, nurture the flame, or the body fills with dense smoke is how that ends. So um, I've had a practice, and it's right at the center of the leadership circle with the creative and reactive, and underneath the reactive are beliefs and assumptions. I've had a practice since early in my career of um, trying to see through those fears into the core belief, the core assumption, the core what's really running the show. And the first one I found was I want to lead. I was a leader in an organization where I was getting feedback that I wasn't leading. And I want to lead, and I got to have everybody like me. That was the first one I realized. It's not okay, even for a nanosecond, to fall from esteem. To risk disapproval was fate worse than death for me. So I was overly agreeable. I was not taking a stand. I wasn't pushing positions. A lot of things I wasn't doing, which are required if you want to lead effectively. And underneath that is my worth is tied up with how you see me, especially people above me who I make up control my future, or I give credibility to, and therefore they can more define me than somebody else that I don't give credibility to, or not as much. So I've been in that, and I can go on and on. So I hold the work as a kind of two currents. You have to get good at navigating two currents. One is ascending and one is descending. Ascending current is it's the evolutionary impulse. It's the pull toward uh, not a transcendence in the sense of leaving and this living in some high state, but toward development, which is both up and down, capacity to hold the whole bandwidth of myself. Um, and of course, then there's the descending current, which is the inflow of light. But as the inflow of light happens, shadows show up. So the voice says, do this. And you go, are you kidding me? You got to be kidding. And spark behind fear. So then you have to work that. You have to work that and see through it. And that can get deeper and deeper, going from sort of beliefs and assumptions at one level. And then underneath that are core wounds, core shadows, core traumas. And those feelings are more intense. Self-hatred, deep, deep shame. And so, but if you, but see, those parts of ourselves are not dark. They're actually light that's been contracted. part of our essence that's been contracted. And I've been playing with the physics of that because it's black hole physics, actually. Time stops. So you call it arrested development or frozen in time. This is all psychological descriptions. It's a younger self. It hasn't grown up. Well, that's actually like physics of the energetic field. You encapsulate it and contract it, and time dilates and stops. So these parts are contracted light, and they can only be unwound uh, by meeting them with radical yes, radical inclusion, radical embrace, complete acceptance, undefended, like welcome, feel it all. And there's an alchemy that happens when we can do that with each other or with ourselves. There's an alchemy. That light reemerges and it comes back online. And there's now more vitality, more joy, more wholeness, more equanimity, more available in more complex situations that would typically upend me. And it's a work in progress. There's a dynamic in it where when you say yes to something big or new, like what's calling me forth, and you say yes, I mean, really say yes, look out. Because everything in you now that needs to grow up or be looked at or emerge, that has to come online in order for you to create that or embody that, is going to show up. So the choice to launch this Unity Academy has kicked my butt. And I'm not, it's been very intense. So this capacity to both be intuitively led, say yes, run higher, learn to run higher frequencies through the field of my body, also has to be matched with the capacity to meet what gets disturbed by that and or starts to reawaken, like, oh, look here, I want to join the dance now. The pain we feel is actually a call from a disowned part that's living in painful duality saying, remember me, both in terms of remember and remember. And so that pain is a beacon, uh, like an instrument landing system. I'm a pilot, I used to be an instrument rated pilot, and you're flying a beam down and you can't see the runway. You just fly the beam until you break through the clouds. Well, that's a beacon for here's where the light is. And you need that if you want to create what you're being asked to step into now. So there's both this direction of opening into learning how to access the field and then bringing that light and embrace to the parts of ourselves that show up when we do that. And it's uncanny in the work we do. We're just having participants access a particular energy, one that comes from the martial arts. It's a hara energy. And it's a deeper layer in the field. It's very accessible for people. And as soon as we do that, some people start to have fear show up or get nauseated. Um, it's as soon as we do it, shadow emerges. Like there's a block there, and you start to put current through it, and it heats up. So this dual capacity, the ascending and descending, is a vital practice. And I've been about it a long time. So yes, I'm scared. Yes, I have doubts. Yes, I don't know where I'm going or how it's going to work out. And I'm really intensely defined on being seen as successful and a big deal. I mean, there's a lot of that in me. So that part gets really, really scared. And so that's my response to your question.
That was utterly glorious, to be honest. Um, I've rarely heard that process described in such a intimate way in terms of being with what is, and like a very grounded, hopeful way, if you get me.
Yeah.
Bob, I'm just, I'm given where we started, just even around what do I want to do with my life, and in some ways, all through it, what am I becoming? And you know, this has brought in ideas around unity of purpose, synchronicities, intuition, saying yes irrespective of fear or doubts or questions, moments where your left brain could not comprehend what's happening, whether it's beams of white light or words and instructions that seem to make no sense and that are somehow still listened to. I'm so intrigued to ask you the question, Bob, of what is a good life for you?
Well, I've been talking about it the whole time. Um, I I think it's entirely possible to live in joy, to live as joy and love, equanimity, independent of what's arising or not arising, what's happening. And I don't do that, uh, but I can start to feel the edges of that. Like reality is inherently joyful. So if we're not joyful, that's because we're off somehow, which doesn't negate grief and loss and pain, suffering, all that. Not a bypass. But when my dad died, I loved my dad so much. It was intense grief. And the surprise was as I dropped to the bottom of, or deep into that grief, that sitting right there at the bottom of it was joy and gratitude. And, and the joy of knowing a love that deep, that fierce, even that would hurt me this much. And so I think that's a good life. We can more and more deeply become who we are, realize that. And the more we do, the more we find out that we are that essence of being that is inherently all things and inherently joyful and inherently loving and inherently at peace, that wants for nothing. What if?
Well, Bob, this conversation has left me wanting for nothing. Um, and I must just say I'm so totally grateful for you joining us here on the What is a Good Life podcast today. That definitely feels like you're sharing so many words and messages and embodying what we greatly need at this time as well. So thank you very much.
Mark, it was a pleasure. Thanks for creating such a spacious uh, playground to just wait around in and have some fun together. It's been an honor, privilege.